right, good afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital educational platform featuring a variety of interactive programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where your team needs it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the Deputy Director of Events here at NCIA, and as always, I'm very excited to welcome you all to another edition of our Service Solutions series today, being presented by the teams at Backbone and Armanino LLP. First off, a thank you and quick note to our guests joining us on our live stream on our Facebook page currently. If you're interested in joining the conversation on Zoom, then follow the Register Now link to sign up so you don't miss out on all the interactive elements of today's programming. Now, let's get this show on the road. We all know the cannabis and hemp industries are experiencing explosive growth. So how can your enterprise stay competitive, compliant, and scale effectively? Well, today we're thrilled to be joined by a panel of software technology experts led by the team at Backbone to answer those very questions. They'll be discussing the best of breed approach to selecting cannabis production, financial, demand, quality, and data warehousing systems to provide custom tailored cannabis and hemp ERP solutions for your business. Well, I know our audience is eager to dive into today's program and our panel is ready to start the conversation. So let's not waste any more time. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome our moderator for today's session, Peter Hewson, the Chief Operations Officer at Backbone, to the program. You can activate your video feed now and head on up to the virtual stage at your convenience, Peter. While doing so, I'll let the audience know a little bit more about your own background and expertise before turning it over to you to introduce their colleagues joining you on today's panel. Peter Hewson is Chief Operations Officer at Backbone, where he oversees professional services, sales, and partnerships. Peter holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from UC Santa Barbara, a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering, and a PhD in Structural Engineering from UC San Diego. Peter is also the co-founder of the Northern Nights Music Festival in partnership with Star Hill Presents and Red Light Management, having co-authored AB 2020, allowing Northern Nights to be the first festival with legal cannabis sales. This led to co-managing compliance and operations for both the Northern Nights Tree Lounge and Outside Lands Grasslands, paving the way for future cannabis-centric events in California. Well, once again, thank you for presenting today's session, Peter. You can kick things off by introducing the rest of your esteemed panel and then having them take it away from here.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Brian, and thank you all here for joining in this conversation today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce a few of the folks here who are going to be a part of this discussion, and also want to make sure that I just, give a thank you out to a lot of the folks who've been in this industry a lot longer than us, have been in the shadows for a very long time and helped build this from day one. So first and foremost, everyone here, make sure you always recognize that, we're all here because of a lot of the people who did the work early on in this industry. With that, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Erica Tingy, who's head of product here at Backbone alongside me, and Todd Bowlesby, manager for technology consulting at Armanino. Erica, take it away.
Hi all. Like Peter said, I'm head of product at Backbone. I started my career as a software engineer on QuickBooks for Desktop, and we really focused on customers back in the early days of Intuit, did a lot of customer interviews. Over time, I moved into product management and worked on QuickBooks Online for a while. And then after that, I actually went to Sage Intacct and was a product manager there for their inventory module. I joined Backbone in 2019, and I've had the privilege of learning all about cannabis from folks like Peter, and also some other folks on our team who've been in the industry for 25 years. So I've definitely learned a lot from all of them. I also spend a lot of time talking to our customers, folks who are building their cannabis businesses, and I'm really excited to bring my experience in building software, especially in the financial space, to this group. Todd?
Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Peter. And thanks, everyone, for having me. I appreciate it. As Peter said, I'm a manager in our technology consulting practice at Armanino. We'll talk more about Armanino later, but about me, I spent 15 years as an accountant, 5 of that as a CFO. Actually got my bachelor's degree in information technology as well, and was an IT manager for a while. I call myself a double nerd, if you will. I can speak debits and credits and bytes and bits. built a few practices from the ground up in terms of different software solutions, and currently a solution architect specializing in Sage Intacct. Been working with Sage Intacct for 6 years, and I actually knew Erica when she worked at Sage Intacct. We worked together in terms of partnerships, and love the Backbone guys. So thanks for having us. Appreciate it today.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to our esteemed panel of experts. To kick things off, I think we're going to activate our first of 3 live polls throughout the session. Our panel would love to know what sector our audience members are approaching today's conversation from. So please, over the next 30 to 45 seconds, get those responses submitted. We'd love to know a little bit who we're talking to and how best to direct the conversation. I'm glad that everybody else in the chat room loved the double nerd title as much as I did. I got a really good kick out of that. I was glad I wasn't mute. I was muted. Okay, perfect. All right, well, we'll give it another 10 to 15 seconds to get those responses in. All right, get them in. Like I mentioned at the top of the hour, participate in every poll throughout today's program, and you will be entered into a random chance to win a free month of NCIA membership. I know there's a lot of non-members in the room. Okay, perfect. All right, let's get that reshared and turned over. All right, perfect. We got a pretty good spread between professional services, distribution, retail, and software. So with that, I'll turn it right back over to you, Peter, and then just give me a verbal cue whenever you need me to advance a slide.
Great. Thanks so much. I think we can jump on into an industry overview. We'll keep this short and sweet. I'm sure you guys have seen various iterations of this industry overview, but to really look at it, where a lot of what we're going to be discussing is this interesting global trade. Globally looking at a market in 2025 right now of 150 billion in North America, including Canada, at 40 billion. It looking like medical leading the charge for obvious reasons. It's going to be the first kind of, as we've seen here in the US across the globe, it's going to be the first entry through medical. And recently was looking at the amount of licenses out there, and over 55,000 registered licenses. And as you guys well know, many more out there. Those are just the ones that actually have programs and setup. Next slide, please. The life cycle of a company. We got 5 broad stages here, from startup to rapid growth, to established, further expansion, and of course exits. You guys can probably guess what we're going to be discussing today. You guys have all here been in the industry or working newly in the industry, and we're in a very, very fast-paced moment of rapid growth as an industry. The news every day. New mergers happening, new states opening up, new countries opening up. So very exciting time to be in this industry. Next slide, please. So you've heard the word 2.0. We're going to go ahead and advance this up to Cannabis 3.0. It's growing up. We've all been watching as institutional capital has really entered into the space. We're seeing conservative jurisdictions, right, especially here in the U.S., kind of rethinking their approach here as tax revenue continues to flow into the adjacent states. I'm sure you guys can all imagine seeing, New York watching everyone go across the bridge over to New Jersey right now. Probably not there's turning some heads over there. Early operators are starting to scale. We've really felt the pain of a lot of the regulations and confusion across both industries, if you will, cannabis and hemp, and really starting to see like the ability for folks identifying those pain points, whether it's with new staff, really aligning themselves as a team and starting to scale. Another thing that we're really seeing is a lot of us, especially here on the West Coast, is we felt a lot of the brunt and the pain of this industry. And as new states open up, and very, wisely, they're learning from those mistakes. So they're able to enter the space in a much more rapid sense with tools, systems, and assistance, essentially from those who have felt those pains, and being able to kind of scale more rapidly and enter the market more successfully early on. And again, as I mentioned earlier, cannabis global trade, I kind of get goosebumps every time I say that, but that's a thing. It's happening right now, and we're going to touch on a few points today. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, right, federal legalization is here. For all of us who've been watching this map turn greener and greener over the years. This is very exciting to continue to look at. There's going to be a wide variety of ways in which quote unquote federal legalization is going to kind of take place. It's obviously there's at the very, very top level where the actual switch is turned on. But as we approach there's going to be a lot of things to take into account. And so I'm really fundamentally understanding that this is going to be a journey. This is not just going to be a switch that's going to turn on. There's going to be new stakeholders that are going to be involved in both the regulatory lobbying as well as us as operators. So just paying attention to really understanding that this is going to be a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And we all need to start thinking about it and how are we going to kind of prepare ourselves for when that switch does turn on. Next slide, please. Now, looking at this map, even more incredible, right? Kind of unbelievable in more ways than one to see this happening. And again, these are just, cannabis has been grown across the world for centuries, right? So this is who's essentially raised their hand and said, we're going to allow it. But again, another very exciting time to be watching this industry grow in a very global way. Next slide, please. And then a little bit talking about what's the future of this industry, right? I think, you know, we've had some conversations with folks and they say, well, you know, how do you really feel about the hemp market? And I think when you really ask that question, it's kind of like, well, are you talking about oils and cannabinoids, or are you really talking about the differences that industrial hemp is going to make? And the big industries are coming in to that piece of the puzzle. And I think we're all very excited about it, but a little bit nervous about it, right? Those are the big players that are going to come in when you talk about textiles, hemp plastics, hempcrete, right? Federal import-export license is another kind of mind-boggling one for all of us who've been in the trenches here. How are we going to, you know, prepare for a UN audit, right? Is that the thing that we're going to have to start thinking about? And folks are thinking about it, and they're transacting today. Furthermore, government transactions, right? What's going to happen and what's happening is that now when you start talking about this level of transacting, right, you're going to have folks like federal governments being involved, maybe getting taxed themselves on this, maybe even facilitating the transaction. So a kind of whole nother ball game, right? Right now, we're not seeing a state kind of get in between and be the broker of transactions right now. But when you talk at the federal level, that's a very common thing. Likewise, I'm sure, you know, many of you hear cannabinoid conversions, I'm going to call it, you know, I'm not going to go into the depths of Delta 8 today, but I can tell you that you guys, you know, we're definitely as researchers and more of the science behind it is we're always going to stay one step ahead of regulations and governments kind of catching up to what we're doing. So it's an exciting time, and, you know, we're all kind of continuing to innovate. And then lastly, right, I mean, psychedelics, again, another big piece of this puzzle. I didn't think ever in my life that someone was going to ask me to model psychedelics in a computer, but that's happening too. So kind of a really interesting time to be a part of this industry. And I think a lot of you here today, because like I said earlier in this conversation, to be even talking about what the future is, this was built on the backs of a lot of people who suffered to get to this stage. Next slide, please.
All right.
So quickly, go ahead, Brian.
No, go for it, Peter. If you got an introduction to this.
You got it. You got it.
Cool. Well, I was going to say we've just come up to our next poll. So just again, encouraging all the audience members to get those submissions in. We'll leave it over 30 to 45 seconds of a window to get those submissions in. Like I said, at the top of the hour, you can enter into a free chance to get a basic month of NCIA membership, during which we have about 8 webinars going on. So you will more than return that value. Perfect. Okay, let's get those responses in. I think we're going to give it another 10 seconds here. I didn't want to interrupt that future poll as somebody who got involved with the cannabis industry in college through advocacy, through Students for Sensible Drug Policy, to see where we've come in the last decade is mind-boggling. So I'm right there with you, Peter. Perfect. All right, I think we're at the end of that submission window, Brooke. So why don't we close that poll out, share the results, and I'll hand the mic right back to Peter. Take it away.
Surprisingly, everyone said 0% United Kingdom, but actually they are the #1 exporter of cannabis at the moment. So surprise to everybody. You guys may be aware of JW Pharma, but there's a lot more coming down the pipe in the UK. Likewise, for number 2, it's actually recently, it was Germany, but recently actually Israel has now importing the most amount of cannabis in the world. So another surprise. And again, it could change monthly, right? A ship could come in at any time. I appreciate everyone who tried to answer this. This is a little bit of there's no way we can know, but I like the idea of Alabama being last too. It sounds about right, but it's actually, the answer is unknown. I wish I could tell the future there. And this is an interesting one. How many applicants are currently being considered for a U.S. federal license? I actually know the answer. It's actually 42. Very interesting, and a lot of them are getting knocked out very quickly. It's been it's an interesting thing to monitor and watch how those are going, but that is a real deal thing. And I think if it's done correctly, we'll finally be free from the chains of the University of Mississippi for our federal research processes. So it's exciting to kind of see that come. And with that, I'll hand it over to Erica.
Yeah, so Peter was talking a lot about how things are changing, and as we move into the future of cannabis and hemp, we all need to be sure we're ready. Obviously, we're talking about software here because we're all software people. So why is software important? In some ways, we're a lot like other industries, especially highly regulated ones like pharmaceuticals. But we do have differences that make using the right software really important. If you're still using spreadsheets for running any part of your business, which many people do, as we know, because they're easy and fast, and everybody understands them, you understand the challenges. There are definitely drawbacks to running your business that way. So why do we need software? Compliance is top of mind for all of us, of course. We have regulations within each state. And as Peter mentioned, there's still this patchwork of compliance requirements across the US, which a lot of multi-state operators have to think about. How can they manage their compliance across those multiple states and sending product back and forth? Software can ease your path to that kind of compliance, because most of the software that is working in cannabis is actually looking at those regulations in the individual states and can manage the compliance for you. Of course, we all also need to know exactly what compliance we need to do in each area. One other area of compliance that's really important is GMP, good manufacturing practices. This is turning out to be especially important in hemp as that market is growing. So being able to track the way that GMP requires, tracking change control and auditability, those are all really important. Eventually, we're going to have to manage federal regulations. And of course, auditability and inspections are a really important part of our lives. And software can help by keeping all the data in one place and making auditability easy. So when somebody comes to inspect your facility, you already have all the data at your fingertips. Productivity is also important. Understanding the productivity of your business is key. For example, you really need to know your yields, which, as we all know, can vary depending on strain, grow method, or the person who's growing them, your vendor. You need to understand if there are any inefficiencies in your processes. And the only way to do that is to gather the data to analyze that will then make it possible to make the right decisions. You need to be able to look at all the aspects of your business from cultivation to distribution and see where any improvements can be made. And then once you understand the supply chain, you really need to look at the demand. What's selling well? What's not selling well? Are there trends that I can follow? Maybe trends in a market in a different region from mine that I can look at and decide to build something different. So doing marketing based on really understanding the market. And of course, for that, it's sometimes important to get industry data rather than just your own data, which, as we know, is becoming more and more available, although it's still hard to get a comprehensive view of the industry. We also need to think about accuracy of our data. Gathering data is only as good as the data itself. So we need to ensure the accuracy of it. The more places data is manually entered, the more chance there is for error. So automating any of the data gathering that you can is really important. That helps you avoid data mistakes. So adding automation, automated scales, or telemetry devices like flow meters, also using scanners so that, you know, one slip of the finger doesn't cause the wrong number to be entered. And once you gather that data, then you have the ability to do some of the analysis that you really need to do. It's also important to think about quality, monitoring quality over time, and being able to do an analysis of how your products are getting built, whether they're consistent. Consistency is extremely important, especially if you're delivering products under a brand and you want to make sure your customers are always getting the same quality. In addition, quality requires that you be able to do a recall. You know, if there's a problem out in the field, you want to be able to figure out where that problem occurred, and having the data across your whole production from cultivation to distribution can really help with that, because you can pinpoint where the issue occurred and then manage recalling all the product. Last, financials. This is an area that, of course, we are all super interested in. So being able to manage costs. In cannabis, our costs fluctuate a lot, and based on a lot of different things. You know, yields can vary, and that directly impacts your margin. So if it costs more to make a product, you really need to know if you can't sell it for more, because of course prices tend to be static regardless of what your costs are. In California, we have cultivation tax, which is based on weight. And if you're doing extraction, the yield for a particular batch happens to be low, your cost goes way up all of a sudden. Using software can ensure accurate costing, especially when your product goes through multiple stages of production. Next slide. So using software that's built for cannabis can be really important. Cannabis has some unique needs that are really different from other industries. As I mentioned, things like compliance, tracking yields. So software that's built specifically for what you do in cannabis is most likely to meet your needs. One thing that I've learned in cannabis is that everyone's process is different, and that's the magic. That's the thing that makes your business different from everybody else's. And so you really want software that can conform to what you need, instead of having your software require you to change your process based on what they do. In addition, when you use software that's really built for cannabis, you get support that's knowledgeable about your industry and can help you build the software in a way that's going to make the most sense for your business. Also, companies that are building software for cannabis, they're building it based on the compliance needs, all the regulatory changes, and they'll keep up with those and make sure that your software is up to date and manage the regulations for you instead of you having to keep up to date, which is especially important for multi-state operators who have to manage multiple sets of regulations while we're still so fragmented. One other interesting thing about cannabis is the unique financial arrangements. You know, we run into a lot of things like people doing splits, which just normal financial software and software built for other industries, they're really just not set up to handle that kind of thing. And of course, using a robust general ledger software like Sage Intacct can handle a lot of things like multi-entity company structures, which are turning out to be really important for cannabis for various reasons, you know, for multiple license companies, but also in order to separate companies that manage cannabis and companies that don't from each other and manage their books separately. Next slide. So as you're thinking about choosing software, it's important to think about where you want to get your software. So some software follows a suite model, like the diagram on the right, where one company provides all the functionality in one package. Some examples of that are things like NetSuite, SAP. So everything is built into one package. You get seamless workflows and you don't have to worry about the flow of data from one area to another. But that kind of software has some issues, especially for our industry. They tend to be built to meet the needs of a lot of different industries. And so it may be missing features that you need, especially in cannabis, because we're such a new industry. And it may be focused on building features that won't benefit you at all. So they may be working away at improving their software, but you're not going to get the benefit of it. And when there are changes in the industry, they may be slow to catch up. If instead you choose what we're calling best in breed software, or best of breed software, you get to choose the software with the functionality targeted at what you need. So you're basically building your own environment of software and making sure that each aspect of it meets the needs of your business specifically. So you get to choose the thing that matches what you need the most in each area. Yeah, so that's pretty much thanks. So payments are a big deal in our industry, even more than in other industries, of course, because we have to worry about these federal regulations where basically we're not allowed to do payments. So unless a company explicitly says they support cannabis, we run the risk of them canceling our account. And why is that? Because they don't want to run the risk, while cannabis is still federally illegal, of having to deal with those kinds of payments. So we really need to be careful to use only cannabis-focused payment services, and also be careful about attaching payments to software that isn't cannabis friendly. I've heard people talk about QuickBooks and the possibility of having your account canceled. Intuit doesn't explicitly support cannabis, but apparently they're only worried about payments. So if you're using something like QBO, but you don't have payments attached, generally you should be fine. It's only the flow of money that these companies are worried about. Of course, there are other companies like Sage Intact that embrace our industry and even have VARs like Armanino who have cannabis experts on staff and a lot of experience. There are also some companies that have made their entire business around cannabis payments, like LeafLink, the order fulfillment software that has seen a lot of success by floating immediate transfer of funds in various states. And then there are also companies like Hyper that were built specifically for cannabis payments. And that's sort of across the board. You know, we have to think about any place where money flows through, even our banks, right? We run the risk with banks of having them decide not to work with us anymore. Just even for ancillary businesses, just because we work with cannabis companies. And as we saw recently in the news, deceiving a banking or payments company about cannabis transactions can be grounds for prosecution for fraud. So it's really best to be upfront and work with people who are in cannabis so we can kind of all support each other. And that also removes some worry about being canceled in inopportune time. Next slide. So one other thing to think about is why the cloud? You know, the cloud's been around for a long time. I think most of us understand it. But of course, in our industry, we're a little bit nervous about putting our data out there. But I think the benefits of being in the cloud really outweigh the risks. So it makes collaborating a lot easier. You can access your data remotely. You can show your data to your accountant or other people who need to see it, and everyone sees the same thing in real time. So if an update happens in one place, it happens everywhere. And it makes the sharing of data much easier. There's also the ease of integration. So with this best in breed approach, you really want to join multiple software together, and software's ability to talk to each other is greatly enhanced by being in the cloud. There are things like QuickBooks Desktop allows hosting, but that really ends up having all the same drawbacks of an on-premises solution. which I will talk about in a minute, like upgrades. In the cloud, you always have the latest features without the hassle of doing upgrades. And you also always have your data backed up. Folks like Intuit do continuous backups and can restore your data. And you don't have to worry about, your place burning down and losing all your backup tapes. One other area that I know folks worry about a lot is security of the cloud. There are a lot, we all do banking in the cloud, I hope. And so there are a lot of ways that your data is protected. It's encrypted either at rest or in transition. And so we should feel pretty safe in general for having our data up there, as long as we, follow the security guidelines. Because of our legacy industry, we know there's a lot of fear about putting data in the cloud, because we're afraid of having that data accessible to the government and regulatory agencies. But this is the future. We need to move into the cloud because it's the future of our industry, and our ability to gather our own data and see, aggregated industry data is key to making our industry successful. Next slide. I just wanted to review a few tech acronyms that are around software. I know we all talk a lot about ERPs, and what it actually means pretty much varies for everybody. It stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, and it can include anything from general ledger and a little bit of CRM to a full scale, covers everything in your enterprise from HR to sales and makes everything seamless. Of course, the promise of ERP often runs into the same issues that I was talking about with suite style or monolith software. It's everything you want, and at the same time, it's nothing you want. BI is growing increasingly important to us. I talked a little bit about aggregated industry data, but it's also important to us, just in our own businesses. So business intelligence, getting a data warehouse that gathers data from different systems, especially matching together supply chain and demand data for planning, is really important to making a successful business. Moving a little bit more into manufacturing, these acronyms are a little bit less known. MRP, Material Requirements Planning, which also often gets translated as Manufacturing Resource Planning, can be important for manufacturers. And a manufacturing execution system is a little bit more technical. It allows for automation of manufacturing practices. CRM is another one that means a lot of different things to different people. Customer relationship management could be anything from a spreadsheet with your customers listed all the way to a fully automated opportunity system like Salesforce. I talked a little bit about GMP, so I won't go into that too much, but I wanted to mention QMS, Quality Management Software, which supports GMP. Comes in a wide variety based on industry and business size. It can be really detailed in software. Can also all be done on paper. The problem with doing everything on paper is then gathering your data and reporting is really hard. And auditability is also questionable because you have to go gather all your binders of paper. So quality management software is pretty key when you're starting to do things like GMP. One bonus acronym, SaaS, Software as a Service, which means cloud-based. So versus software hosted in the cloud. Think about QuickBooks Online is SaaS, and QuickBooks Desktop, if you host it on a hosted network, then it's hosted in the cloud, but not actually SaaS. Next slide. This kind of wraps everything up. these are all the areas of software that you might need. And using cannabis specific software for each of these can be really helpful, especially in the supply chain management and the demand chain management. But even in financials, you need something that's customizable enough that it can be specific to the things that cannabis needs. Legacy seed to sale systems really weren't intended for complex supply chains, and that's what cannabis is turning out to be. We have a really complex supply chain and demand chain environment, and we need software to help us track everything and allow us to make the most out of the things that we're doing. And now we'll move on to poll number 3, which I think you got a little glimpse of earlier. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, Dave, you'll get your chance to get those submissions in for this poll. So we're going to reactivate poll number 3 now, Brooke, if you wouldn't mind getting that reshared. And we'll give it about 30 to 45 seconds. Again, just one quick reminder that if you are one of the many non-members that are participating in today's session, participation in every single poll, of which this is the last one, will enter you into a random chance to win a free month of NCIA membership. We've got a lot of activities taking place that are member exclusive over the next month and a half. So I would love to get as many people underneath our membership umbrella as possible. All right. Give it another 5 or 10 seconds. Our panel would definitely love to know the main avenue where you source software recommendations as they dive into the latter half of this presentation. All right, perfect. We've got those submissions reshared, so I'll turn it right back over to either Erica or Todd if this is the transition point.
Yeah, so those results are pretty interesting. Not surprising. I fully expected that Google would be the top reason, but I like to see that trusted advisors are in there too. That's really important as you're making important decisions for your business. So now we're going to move on to Todd's section. Take it away.
Thank you, Erica. Appreciate it. So how do I know I need software? Well, security is always an important aspect of software, both from a user perspective and a data perspective. From a user perspective, it's important you have the ability to keep the users in their respective swim lanes, if you will. For example, you don't usually want your employees to access confidential information, such as payroll information, or you may want to ensure users can only see the departmental or entity data they belong to. On the other hand, there's the data perspective of security. Most systems these days are cloud-based, as Erica was talking about, so it's important they adhere to and are certified by certain guidelines, such as all those wonderful acronyms, SSAE, SOC, ISAE, and PCI. They should also, as Erica mentioned, have robust data centers that provide a high level of security, both virtual, and by that I mean encryption of data, both during transmission and at rest, intrusion detection, hardened firewalls, etc., and physical, badge access, biometric security, CCTV, and so on, as well as solid backup and disaster recovery plans. Software that's on premises can have a number of issues related to security, since it takes a large amount of both money and time to formulate the kind of security cloud-based systems have by utilizing data centers, because those data centers are dedicated to that type of thing. In terms of availability, another area of consideration, in terms of cloud-based systems, availability is twofold. First is that cloud-based requires a solid internet connection. For the most part in today's society, this is a non-issue. Some of us have experienced those issues though. Second is availability and response time. You want to ensure that the system you're looking at has a proven track record of availability. Typically, you want to look at a system that has at least a 98% or higher uptime rate. But equally important is the response time. A large amount of latency can slow your users down and make them less efficient. Response times of less than a second are good, with those under half a second being ideal. In the case of on-premises software, because these systems tend to be of older design architecture, in other words, using older technologies, they often experience issues that make the system unavailable and require an IT person to troubleshoot. And they also tend to be susceptible to corruption or have issues with things like the good old driver conflicts that we've experienced in the past. Workflow fit. By this, we mean how well does the software fit your organization's particular business processes, as well as what inefficiencies and issues can it help you resolve. Some common indicators software may be able to help you are you're hiring people just to track your inventory or do data entry. Important data is being emailed around in spreadsheets. Some data is only known by one person. What if they get COVID? Just saying. You have the data, but you can't report on it. You're spending weeks gathering more data more than once. Or perhaps you find yourself having to enter data multiple times, for example, in different systems. In this case, it indicates you may want your solutions to integrate and talk to one another. Best of breed, best in class. Next slide, thank you. Common indicators that you don't need software are you're buying a lot of software, different software packages. In this case, perhaps the answer is people. You may be missing the right talent in the right positions and trying to fill that gap using software. Or it may simply be process. A lot of times the answer is not software, but rather assigning someone in your organization to own a certain area and creating the right process to make that area more efficient. It could even be that you need to rearrange responsibilities in your organization to ensure you have the right people in the right roles. Great people, but maybe they're just not in the right spot. Another indication is if the software you do have is giving you more data than you have a use for. Having too much data is just as bad as having too little data. In fact, sometimes it can be worse because the data you do need to see gets buried in the extraneous information. Or it could be you have no idea how to get at the data you need because it's not easy to find. And finally, it could just be that you're looking for that proverbial silver bullet software that does everything for you. Many times this occurs when people are trying to find a single software that provides all the solutions they need, when in reality, frankly, no single software typically provides all the answers. More often, especially in the cannabis space, you will need specialized software to meet your needs, which again is where the best of breed approach really shines. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, first, you need to assess your current situation and determine what your needs and requirements are. Start with your goals. For example, you may want to know that the products you're selling are profitable, that your taxes are as low as legally possible, that your production process is at its expected level of productivity, that you have all the data you need if you're audited. That's always an important one. That your teams all have access to the same data, how efficient your employees are, or how to forecast your production for next year. That's equally as important, right? You also want to know where your organization is headed overall. For instance, do you plan to be a single or multi-state operation? Especially now in the United States when, multiple states are doing different things, right? Will your business encompass a grow operation, manufacturing, distribution, retail, or some combination thereof? And how big do you expect your business to grow over the next 5, 10, or 15 years? In addition to having systems that can help you effectively and efficiently run your organization, you need to consider the stakeholders. So who needs access to dashboards and reports and key metrics, and specifically what information do they require? Cost. Once you have a clear picture of what your needs and requirements are, you need to find solutions that will address those needs and requirements. However, this should be balanced with the cost of the solutions themselves. In other words, you want to weigh the cost of a given solution against the value of the benefits that solution provides. Do I sound like an accountant? Yes. You also need to navigate the various pricing models on the market. Oftentimes, software pricing can be confusing and filled with nuances, so you want to pay close attention when reviewing various pricing options. And in those cases, working with a good partner can help a lot. In terms of ease of use, another thing to consider, which is quite important, is that ease of use of the system. While a solution may be able to address many, if not most, of your needs, if you find it difficult to navigate or locate the functionality you need, the benefit of the solution drops dramatically. If you can't locate what you're looking for in the software, then it's the same as not having it in the first place. Also, if the software is difficult to use, your employees aren't going to adopt that software, or if they do, they're not going to be as efficient as possible. Further, cross-training employees or training new employees in the use of the software becomes difficult and time-consuming, and those all add up to dollars, right? You should look for a solution that has a clean user interface, free of clutter, and one that places the things you use most up front while making it easy to locate those you are using infrequently. And the user experience should be enhanced by allowing the end users to customize the user interface to fit their particular work style. That's really important. Next, thank you. As you may have surmised already, selecting and implementing software is a journey. And like any journey worth making, it can have its peaks and valleys, twists and turns, potholes and pitfalls. That's why a good Sherpa, someone to help guide you, is essential. In terms of your technology stack, we firmly believe the best approach, especially given where technology is today, is to select the software that suits your organization's particular needs and that has an extremely open interface. By taking advantage of the best of breed approach, you can have what's best for your business today, and also, this is important, as it grows, switching out components as needed, something you can't do with a monolith or an all-in-one suite approach, as Erica talked about previously. Armanino and Backbone specialize in helping you ascertain what is your business needs and sifting through the many options, ultimately architecting a solution that will provide you benefits today and far beyond. And we can also help you implement these systems and ensure that you're not only set up to work properly for your specific use case scenario, but that they talk to one another seamlessly. I'm going to turn it back over to you guys.
Yeah, thank you for that, Todd and Erica. It's been quite the journey thus far. I think really kind of harping on what Todd just said about a Sherpa. We consistently find that sometimes folks are saying, why are you asking me so many questions? Well, we're asking you so many questions because we're trying to tailor your solution to fit your needs. So right now we've been working together. We've got roughly 12 projects in the pipeline right now, 4 actively underway. 8 are preliminary, but very exciting. And really, primarily MSOs and vertically integrated operators, really kind of the end to end of what we're looking at. We've kind of found this whole kind of between the legacy seed to sale and kind of light systems, which are fine to kind of get your feet wet, and kind of full blown ERPs that don't really have too much business in this industry because they haven't been boots on the ground and they don't really understand what the operator's needing. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Backbone. We're really focused on supply chain management. Really, really important for the way that we look at things is that you should be able to do you, and the software will kind of be built around you, not you changing your processes because of the software that you selected. Really, again, focus on the boots on the ground operators. I can't say that enough. Right? How many of you ever pay attention to the leader of your graveyard shift overnight, right? That is an important shift and it gets overlooked. So something that's kind of usable, understanding, and visually stimulating, if you will. And really, we're a very interesting combination of really strong operators and consultants who've been in the industry for a long time, and then with some enterprise developers from places like Intuit, Sage, and NetSuite. As you can see here, I mean, you want to know where the cannabis industry is going? This is a steam distillation plant that we've been supporting that is used in the mint and cedar essential oil extraction industry. Now we're seeing it used for hemp. So kind of wild to see this equipment from other industries coming in. And that's a little bit about Backbone and where we are today. Next slide, please.
All right, and then real quickly about Armanino, I know this is a bit of an eye chart, so thank goodness you guys are going to get a copy of it, right? So Armanino has been around for 50 years. It's the largest CPA firm in California, 22nd largest firm in the United States, and we have over 1,600 employees, which, as you can imagine, that means we have a lot of different areas that we can help our clients out with, from audit to tax. We do a lot of audit and tax in cannabis. In fact, one of our partners literally did the largest SPAC in the world, and it was in the cannabis industry. Consulting, that's where I specialize in, so software solutions, working with great partners like Backbone, management advisor, financial advisory. We have our BOSS, which is our business outsource service. And then we also get into really super high tech things like blockchain, AI, we have an AI lab, robotic process automation, cool stuff like that. And then, of course, risk assurance and advisory and wealth advisory, too.
All right, fantastic. Well, I was glad that we could wrap the program up with that overview of both Backbone and Armanino. So thank you, Peter and Todd, and thank you, Erica, for delivering that much needed introduction to all of these techniques and services and platforms during the middle of the program. We've got a little bit of time left and a few open questions on the Q&A board. I see that we signaled Sean's question as the first one that we were going to answer live. So for all of you all that might be calling in or don't have access to the Q&A board, I'll restate it verbally to the panel and we'll dive right into that. Okay, so Sean McLean asked, why does it appear that API integration between cannabis technology companies and accounting solutions appears to be way behind other industries? Integration between track, trace, inventory, and accounting should be the path for good internal controls. So does anyone on the panel have some insights on that?
I have a quick comment on that, and it's more of a compliment to Erica and her team, which is that strong enterprise APIs are something that are foundational. What we've seen across the board is that, and no, this is not speaking poorly on anybody, but if you didn't build that into your foundation from the get-go of your product design, then it's an afterthought. And so what we're seeing is a lot of folks attempting to kind of glue it together after the fact, and what you result in is kind of more of what we say the journal entry approach. And when you're looking at kind of a little bit more of a enterprise approach, you're really looking at subledger and transaction level postings to your accounting system. So I think it's, again, not insulting anybody, but it's just something that you've got to build from the foundation. And Erica, I'm sure you've got more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Peter pretty much said it all from the Backbone side. Building a good integration, it's not just about APIs, it's also about building a flow of data that makes sense in both sets of software. And so understanding understanding exactly what your customers are trying to do is really important. And I agree with you that having that API level data flow is really important for the cannabis industry across all of our functions. Going back to the diagram I showed of demand chain, supply chain, financial management, we have to connect all of those things together in order to get all the data we need.
Yeah, and I would agree with Sean. And why does it appear that it's been behind? My opinion is because, let's face it, cannabis is just now starting. It's kind of, I would view it as it might have just moved out of the toddler area. We might be in the gangly teenage stage. And so I think as it matures, the industry overall, you're going to see more folks like Backbone and Armanino and Sage Intacct with these world-class open web services APIs that can really form those integrations and bonds between. And to your point, Sean, track, trace, inventory, accounting, they should be all focused for good internal controls. And it's great to hear Peter and Erica talk about this. So, but I think that's the answer to the question is why? Because we're still teenagers, right? I wish I was.
Yeah. And it's our opportunity to make our marks right now as well.
That's right.
So, yeah. Perfect. Well, we've got another question I want to make sure that we address within the hour from Adriana. We got them received right in the middle of the program. So Adriana asked, are you all starting to see a growth in cannabis co-manufacturers versus manufacturing in-house? Is that something that anyone on the panel will be able to speak to?
Yeah, Adriana, it's a great question. I think what we're seeing is most folks are gonna, typically they'll start with some in-house, right? But if you really look at the way this industry is going right now, it's like really, really strong co-packers, manufacturers is, right? Even if you're a big brand, right? You're looking for the best in class. We're talking about best in breed for technology right now. I think likewise, if you are a top brand, you're looking for best in breed manufacturers. And what's interesting about that, right, is that if you are a co-packer and you're co-packing, co-manufacturing for 7, 8, 9, 10 brands, oftentimes what we're seeing is that they're being required to report up to those brands in 5, 6, 7, 8 different systems. And so that's part of what we're trying to do here at Backbone, is alleviate that by reporting and transparency, in terms of reporting up to those, I guess what we call them, brand overlords, and being able to put them in their place and say, no, I think what we call here at Backbone, we call it radical transparency is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you
Well
so much
said.
for that question, Adriana. I think we've got time for one more question. I don't want to cut this off if we don't have to. I noticed that an upvote got received. So we got a question from Beatroth. It came in a little bit ago, related to predictions surrounding Franwell and Metrics involvement in the industry in a year or 3 years. Is that anything that you all might have some insight on, or just some predictions?
I'm going to be careful with this because I'm not quite sure who else is on this call right now. But I'm going to go ahead and say that they are doing their best to kind of keep up with the times. And I would say that anyone who wants to, you know, put them down for what they're doing, I challenge you to try and do what they're doing right now, because it's not an easy battle that they're trying to get to. And really, it's just going to tell, right? It's what the requirements, and the government doesn't know what the requirements are. But back to Todd's kind of point, which he said that something 98% uptime, I think that's what they need to be working on. And I think as long as they keep the focus on what they're the best at, I think it's going to be okay. I think if they try to widen their reach too far, right, I think that'll be the limiting factor. So that's all I'll say there.
And I'll just add one thing, you know, we need to be careful not to put all our eggs in one basket. And so going back to the integrations discussion, being able to swap different integrations in and out is going to be really important over time as our industry is changing so much.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for that question to wrap up our Q&A portion of the program. I know that we do still have one question outstanding on the Q&A board, but that being said, I think that might be the perfect conversation starter for a post-event conversation in the Slack channel. So Sean, thank you for contributing 2 questions to the Q&A segment of the program. Our team will transfer your question into the Slack channel after we wrap up the broadcast shortly. And then we highly encourage all of you all to follow that invitation email that you should have received prior to the broadcast and carry on the conversation with our expert panelists for the rest of the week. Like I said, we'll keep the Slack channel open for 72 hours.
The after party.
Yeah, exactly. And and so with that, I'll turn it back, I think, to Peter, Todd, and Erica. Do you all have any final thoughts or, you know, a key takeaway from today's session that you want to leave the audience members? And if it's head to your all's website to learn more, we can leave it at that as well.
Todd, you go
My
first.
perspective, thank you, sir. My perspective is key is integration and talking. That's the biggest point. And I'm not even talking about software. I'm talking about partners, right? So that's what I love about Peter and Erica and their team is we have a great partnership and a great rapport with one another and communication. So not only does our software talk really well, we work together really well. And so keep that in mind when you're looking for somebody to partner with.
Love it.
Erica.
Love it. All right, perfect. Well, thank you all so much once again for presenting a fantastic panel today. With that, I'll lead the audience in giving our panel of experts a virtual round of applause. If you enjoyed today's program, feel free to raise your hand in the audience poll, signaling your interest in today's session. Perfect. Love seeing all those pop-ups always come up. And then please do, we strongly encourage you all to carry on the conversation inside of the private shared Slack channel. I think our panel is going to leave the virtual stage per se over the next few moments. They'll stick around inside of the chat room. If you have any additional follow-up questions or you want to send them your gratitude via a DM, feel free to do so. And then as always, all the audience members, we'd love for you to stick around for another 2 to 3 minutes while we give you a quick preview of some upcoming activities underneath the NCIA umbrella that we'd love all your participation in.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, Todd, and Erica. Thank you once again. All right. Okay, so later this week, actually tomorrow, we have another NCIA Committee Insights program being presented. Energy consumption is one of the largest costs for a licensed cannabis cultivation. And during this webinar entitled Energy Use and Working Towards Standardizations in Regulations, we'll have industry experts from NCIA's Cannabis Cultivation Committee share what cultivations are doing to lessen energy consumption and the potential need for standards and/or regulations to help promote greener cannabis cultivations. Then immediately following that program, we'll be showcasing yet another NCIA Committee Insights entitled No Time to Waste, Putting Equity First in the Mid-Atlantic Region. With the Mid-Atlantic poised to become the next region to ride the wave of cannabis legalization, this is a timely conversation to help those in the region understand what demands they should be making from their lawmakers, all from the perspectives of those who've come before us and had their boots on the ground, as Peter alluded to earlier, in different markets who've fought these kind of battles before. Led by members of NCIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, this panel will discuss the key positions that all activists should dig their heels in to ensure cannabis legislation is as equitable as possible. As with all of our Industry Essentials educational webinars, these sessions are free for all current NCIA members and only $15 for non-members interested in participating. However, if you're one of the non-members attending today's session, feel free to use the code NCIA100, which I'll pop into the chat room as well, to redeem a complimentary ticket to show our gratitude for your participation in today's programming led by Backbone and Armanino. And then a quick note, we currently have over 9 webinars scheduled between now and mid-April, which are all free for current NCIA members. So if you're not an NCIA member, please do consider activating your membership now to gain access to this and all the other amazing benefits offered. Or you can continue to purchase those passes to continue engaging with this invaluable programming prior to taking the plunge on an annual commitment for membership. All right. And with that, thank you all so much for participating in another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. A huge thank you once again to Backbone and Armanino LLP for presenting today's session, alongside our audience members and member businesses, which make our work possible each and every day. Please complete the attendee survey that you'll all be redirected to following the closing of this meeting room. That will grant you immediate access to our presentation file. And then do note that all NCIA members receive exclusive 30-day access to formatted video recordings of all of our Industry Essentials webinars that are first posted in our members-only community platform, NCIA Connect. Stay on the lookout to our website for the public listing of today's session to be made live over the next few days as well. And then, as always, we'll leave you with this end of event credit sequence highlighting the half-dozen+ member businesses that participated in this afternoon's session. If you don't see your company included, that means you need to head to thecannabisindustry.org/join following today's session to join the movement for a responsible and equitable cannabis industry. To change things up again a bit, we'll showcase some audio stylings by yours truly, and enjoy. And we hope that you'll see you tomorrow afternoon for our double header of NCIA Committee Insights programs. Thank you so much for participating again today. We'll see you next time.